Mm,
So John asked me to do this, and I'm not quite sure what it is I'm supposed to do. So he gave me a suggestion, and then one of the things I think about the real value of things like this is that the coaches, get to sort of exchange ideas about things or talk about things and get new perspectives. And just to give you sort of a personal example as to why I think it's important, I started rowing a really long time ago, and I've had a lot of good coaches in my life, and I've succeeded under all of them. And I didn't succeed, because I'm some kind of physical specimen, sort of giant amongst men kind of rowers. I'm 6'2", and my racing weight was about, between 185 and 195 for the entirety of my career. So I wasn't going around like just, breaking ergs and oars and things like that. I had to learn how to row well, and I learned under guys like Korzanowski, and Mike Spracklin, Igor Grinko, Hartmut Buschbacher, even Ted Nash, if you want to consider him as a high performance coach. He certainly had his strengths in a number of things and was an awesome motivator. Curtis Jordan, Charlie Butt was my high school coach. Charlie Butt, the senior, not the current Harvard head coach, but his father, and others. And the thing is about that is, like, those coaches brought something different to the table, whether it was some kind of training, some kind of intensity or mentality or technique, or all the above. And I think that one of the things that I've been able to do as a coach myself, and even as an athlete before that, is I was able to draw from everybody and try to, hopefully take the best parts of what each of them had to offer and put it together, which is why I feel like I was able to go far. I mean, I was on the U.S. team for 10 years, bookended it with Olympic teams and, so on. So I think that that approach really worked. And I think that that's the value. The value is that everybody has something. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody has something, some sense of knowledge or some experience or some nugget of wisdom or anything that they can offer. And then everyone can gather all that, put it together the way they will, and create their own thing. Prior to everyone else coming on, John and I were also talking a little bit about the concept of right and wrong in coaching, especially in coaching technique. And I'll maintain that there is no right and there is no wrong. There's what works and what doesn't work. And what's important about that is consistency. I guess it started off with the notion that all coaches are right. So everybody on my screen right here, all you guys, you're all right. When you tell your athletes what to do, you're right. Now, it may turn out in the future there was something better, which doesn't necessarily mean you were wrong. It's really more of a perception game. It's more of a, how do you get people to do what needs to be done the same way, the same time, and all that, without being right. So you must. But again, it's not really a game of right and wrong. Again, it's what works and what doesn't work. And then we spend our entire careers honing really what works and trying to minimize what doesn't work. So, excuse me. So what John did was he sent me this video. Doesn't give me an idea to show you guys something and sort of an evolution of, let's call it, technique, and what you could say didn't work in the past for some athletes versus what's working better for them now. And we reframed it in a, where you've taken this program. When you came in, guys were rowing like this. Right now they're rowing like that, and they're doing better. So you can surmise that, that it's working. So I can play the video for you, and you guys can look at it, and you can come to your, draw your own conclusions. Or if you have questions about it or anything you want to say, anything you want to add, that's fine, because at the end of the day, nobody rows perfectly, nobody coaches perfectly. We don't even know what that is. So again, like I may probably be about the oldest person on here. Let me take a look real quick, and very likely have more experience than most of you, just in terms of rowing, racing, that kind of thing. Or even if I don't, we all have something that we can gain from each other. Even like the youngest and newest of you might ask a question, and I'll go, "Oh shit, I never even thought of that." So that's my preface into this. Before I start this video, does anybody have anything they want to add to what I was just talking about? As I have a sip of beer. Anyone? No? I don't have to. I think everybody's muted though.
Yeah, I sort of have a question, but we can come back to it after we look at the video.
Okay. All right. Well, so this is a video that John had or came across, whatever, sent it to me. This was the year before I showed up. You might recognize a couple people in here. I'll point them out as we go. And so just looking at the technique of how these guys row and how the boat's moving. And then I'll show some video that we took from Florida just before coming back up here so that we could lock ourselves in our homes. So without further, let me maximize that. Let me share this, right? Hold on. All right, so we gotta do that. And this whole, let's see, share with everyone, right? Is that how this goes?
Yeah, should be the right. There you go.
Does everybody see that, or is it just John? Anybody not see that?
We're good. We can see it.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay, we're good. So, all right. So this is David Judah in the bow of this boat. And I don't know who's in the stroke of this boat. Kristen, you might know who that is.
It's Reach.
That's Reach?
Yeah.
You got on his head.
Hat? Huh.
Interesting. All right. All right, so that's Reach. That's Judah. All right, so you watch that for a little bit. We'll fast forward because there's some video of Keen with Eric Winstead. And apologies for the choppiness and the blurriness, but this is how it came to me. But just watch the rhythm of the stroke, watch what the blades are doing, see if you can see where the power of the stroke is, because at the end of the day, length and power are your two main factors. Okay, there are several factors, but they're the two main ones, arguably the most important. All right, so watching, okay, so that was Keenan and Reach. So this is, sorry, that was Judah and Reach. This is Keen and Winstead. So Justin Keen and Eric Winstead. And it's really, really choppy, isn't it? If anybody gets seasick, just let me know. Let's move it forward a little bit.
I can share the link to the YouTube video in the chat if maybe that, I don't know if that will help people down the line.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that just so it might be slightly better for them. Okay, so the key things here to watch, especially are with Judah here again in the bow seat. Let's get past that. All right, and then again with Keen here again in the stroke seat, because these guys are still rowing with me now. The other two are not. All right, not the best angle. Let me see if I can find it better here. Okay, this ought to be it. All right, this ought to do, maybe. All right, again, Keen with Winstead, Keen on the, okay, never mind. And then Reach Judah on the right. Okay, now keep that image fresh in your mind right there. Let's go back to this one now. All right, so this is Judah rowing now down in Florida with us just this past month. So just try to, just mentally So to keep track of any differences that you see or what they might be, and then we talk about them. All right, so there's Judah. All right, let's find, Keen will be in this boat here, in the 3 seat of this boat. Okay, and then I'll show you one more, show you double. Let's put that one over there. Okay, this is Greg on Solibert and Chris Shirley. Okay, sorry, that one was a little bit short. Anyway, so I think those are pretty drastic differences in technique. And as I said, 2 of those guys were rowing in that first video and are still rowing today. So with that, I'd be curious to see what or hear what you guys saw. Just feel free to speak up whenever you, because I don't think everyone's going to jump in at the same time here.
Yeah, so in the older video, it looks like it's just more like you're really hauling on it into the finish. I mean, granted, I was part of that group at that time, so I sort of have a little more inside knowledge, but it just looks like there's a lot more action in with the arms into the finish in the older video versus the newer one being slightly smoother. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, let's see. What do you guys, what do other people see?
And it's tough to tell with the screen sharing choppiness, but it definitely looks just quieter in general. Like it's more stable, especially as they approach the catch. And then they get the blade in, then they start driving it, and then the drive, everything just looks quieter. It's longer for sure, and more patient in general.
I want to throw this out there because with that observation, that was who's that?
Connor.
Connor. Okay. So Connor, a couple of things. One is, actually, I don't think the guys right now are rowing longer than they were. In fact, they're rowing a little shorter than I wanted to, and that was one thing I was hoping some of you guys would pick up on, was that it wasn't quite so long in the front where it probably should be. But I think what gives the illusion of being smoother is it is a little quieter, right? I mean, there's less, side to side motion in the boat like this, you can tell. But because of the ratio of the drive speed to recovery time, and I won't say recovery speed because we do have a fairly active recovery. So there's a lot of time right at the finish of the stroke. Let me pull it up again. Because the quad is a good example of that ratio. No, that's not the one. Okay. So if you look at, you just time it, right? It's like, go, stop, 1, 2, 2, go. Stop. You can see the ratio of the drive is much quicker to the ratio of time on the recovery. So the boat runs a lot more, but that's a function of power. So these guys are rowing more powerfully through the water to get the speeds that they're getting, which this boat's moving pretty quick right now. It's sitting right there at about 143, 142, 143 at about 22 strokes a minute. So that's pretty quick, and that was a 5K piece that they were doing, hard, steady state. So you have to get quick through the water. You got to take your time on the recovery. It's the only way to really get speed, and the only way you can really build speed also. That other video, okay, if you look at their ratio, drive to recovery, it's closer to 1-to-1. So what you're not seeing is a lot of speed through the water and a lot of time on the recovery. You're seeing more or less kind of, at least I am, sort of the same speed through, the same speed on the recovery. So the irony, John, is that I actually don't see a lot of like aggressive, say, arms at the finish. In fact, I see them kind of dying out through the stroke. What I see is a hips driven, but then no body and no back end acceleration off of the hips moving. Let me move this thing again. See what I'm saying? You see the hips move. There's not a whole lot of movement up in the hands and up in the body, right? It's not as aggressive as the hips are. It's like this, you know, again, this sort of aggressive hip movement and just sort of a dull body movement afterwards. By contrast, what is it again? Hold on a second. Can't see what I'm doing. By contrast, you can see there's definitely in this, because the rate's low, there's way more acceleration through the back half of the stroke, even though they're in a quad, which is in a faster boat. So they got to take the front quicker also. But they're continuing that acceleration curve right through the finish. Are you guys seeing that or no? Is anybody not seeing that?
The video is a little choppy, which makes it a little harder, but I do, now that you pointed it out, I think it's a little easier to see.
I wish you could see it as smooth as I see it then. I don't know how to fix that.
Could you upload it to YouTube so we could watch it after the fact?
Yeah, I could. You realize that'll be the first time I've ever uploaded to YouTube, so I'm not going to have to figure that part out myself. But I can do it. Unless someone's got iPhone, I could probably. Oh shit, pad's downstairs.
I can help you out with that.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly put that, you know, those things on YouTube just so you can get a closer or a better look at it. Is that Beth? Beth Green, you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Going incognito, are you?
I just got back from a run. It's messy over here.
Okay. All right. Yeah, well, good to see you. Glad you came. At any rate, so that's kind of the main thing. If it's not that obvious, guys, I apologize, but to me, it's like night and day. But then again, you know, this is one of the things that John and I were talking about before you all showed up, is like, you know, because I see these guys a lot and I've watched their entire evolution, right? I have a better idea of what to look for, whereas maybe you guys don't. Although I would think that with fresh eyes, it might be more, actually more obvious. There was a famous coach. I can't remember if it was a Kiwi coach or if it was what's his name, the Aussie coach, Dick. Anyone to help me out with that? The guy who used to coach the four. He coached the Kiwi pair also. But at any rate, okay, it's not important. His style was to actually coach for a while, then just look somewhere else and look away for a while, so you can look back. And every time you look back, you're kind of looking back with fresh eyes. Because I've caught myself just sort of getting a little bit mesmerized by what I'm seeing, and you stop seeing things. So it really does help to look with fresh eyes. Yeah, that's all I got on that. If anybody wants to throw something out there.
So you're dealing with a lot of guys coming from just various, like everyone sweeps in college at this point. And you're dealing with a lot of guys from various programs and various backgrounds, technical, whatever. And do you find that some people come out of their collegiate programs more or better to jump into the way of sculling that you're coaching? Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, the question makes sense. It just that it's not like, I've had 1,000 people come through the door to start noticing these trends.
Right.
I've had maybe 50 people come through the door. So it's really not that many to see the difference. And at the same time, most people are so unfamiliar, let's say, coming out of college, you're so unfamiliar with sculling anyway that it all looks kind of bad. What I tend to deal with is guys who have at least some sculling background. Most of the guys here have been sculling for a little while, but I've had to bring some of them up. Chris Shirley's, he wasn't doing a whole lot of sculling before he came on board. Same thing with Charles Anderson. Same thing with Finn Putnam, or even Tom Pfeiffer for that matter. So most of those guys, they were capable enough to get down a race course, but maybe not that good. So in that sense, it's actually better. Your ball of clay is a little bit less molded. You can shape it yourself a little bit more, as long as they are malleable. Can be coached, can make the changes that you need when you need them. Right, Kristen? You still there?
I guess that sort of leads into what I wanted to ask you earlier. Like, I guess at the level you're operating at, there's a lot of people who are pretty sure they know everything. Is that just sort of right now I'm coaching a bunch of high schoolers who will tell you they know nothing about rowing. But you're coaching a bunch of people with occasionally pretty significant rowing backgrounds. Does that change the dynamic to be, towards more of a collaborative effort in the boathouse versus sort of more, I don't know, this is what we're going to do oriented?
So I could answer that, and I can answer how I manage it, but there's a couple on here who I have coaching for might disagree with me. So I used to, Beth, who's on here also, I used to coach her back when I was coaching with Igor back in the early 2000s. So, actually the short answer to your question is, in my experience, okay, it's going to be a longer answer. In my experience, athletes who are worth their salt are going to have some sense of ego where they think they know. You have to kind of attack things that way. Anyway, that's the animal inside of you. In fact, I've kind of tried this experiment once or twice with the guys. It's like, what animal are you? If you had to pick the animal that really represents your character, what's it going to be? And I really look for in that is who picks a predator, who picks, not a predator. Okay, so it's not just predator or prey, but there are other sort of more neutral characters in there as well. And your predators are the ones who are like your racers. They're the ones who are going to really want to go out and just sort of attack things. And they're probably the ones you're going to have, clashes with like that also, which is expected. I think it's expected. I was the same way as an athlete. Surprise, surprise. But at the end of the day, you work through it, and both parties realize that, just like I was telling you guys, everyone has something to learn from each other. Some of us have a bit more experiential knowledge to pass on, but everybody's got a perspective. And I think, a big part of it is perspective. Maybe not the major part, but a big part of it is, especially like with how you deal with athletes and how you are going to keep them around long enough to keep dealing with them, right? Not that everybody's such a prima donna, but in a sense, it's kind of a shopper's market, buyer's market. So you want to keep them around. But yeah, so anyway, without going too far on a tangent, it's going to happen. I think it should happen. I feel a little encouraged when I have athletes who challenge me because they feel they've got, not just because they feel they know better, but they're able to show it in some ways. it's a balance, I suppose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the
All right,
athlete who's just
I'll
like,
chime in and ask something about the video. So this was something I had noticed.
oh, hey, Becky. Sorry,
Hi,
I didn't
how
see
are
you.
you?
Good, how you doing?
So 2017 at Worlds, this was something I noticed, and I see it in this quad, and I'm just absolutely amazed when you put 4 heavyweight guys into a quad, how much vertical displacement there is. And
In the boat.
that's right. And
Yeah.
and I'm sure it's because they're heavyweight men and that acceleration, but I even see significantly more in the quad than in the videos of the doubles. And I will say it's really hard to look at from my screen. The rhythm catch to the recovery drive rhythm is very difficult to pick
Yeah.
out because of the choppiness. But
Okay.
you want to talk about that?
So just displacement?
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay, so I need to preface this with I am not a physicist by any, I'm not, and I don't do fluid dynamics or anything like that. However, I can tell you what I've seen in my day, and in the years that I've been coaching and been racing, and when I see boats that are really churning along, is that seems to have little effect on the speed of the boat, because the displacement's always, maybe because, but I notice that it's always offset with, rebound in the other direction. So you put a lot of hole in the water, then a little hole in the water, and a lot of hole in the water, and a little hole in the water, right? And you think that, well, that's got to hurt something, but then there's a rhythm that goes along with that. If you think about, the carnivals or state fairs, the little cages you get in, you make them go around in a circle like this by just swinging inside of it and finally getting it around. When you finally find that rhythm that keeps it going, it reminds me of that. I'm not saying it's the same, it's not the same mechanism, but it reminds me of that. And some of the best boats I've ever seen race and ever seen row, you see that in the boat, just shoom, 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 almost cycling along like this. But the rhythm of it carries it. I don't have an answer as to why, and I certainly, I think any fluid dynamics person will tell you, well, no, that's less efficient. But with the movement of the weight, the shifting of the weight, and the way blades put power up against the water, up against the pins, and how that changes through the arc, and all this stuff factors in, I guess. But I don't steer away from it. In fact, I can watch boats get into that, and then you just want it to keep going because becomes really efficient in the way you actually use energy then.
Say it again so everyone could see what we're talking about.
Wait, did you say that? Can you say that again?
Could you just play the video again so everyone
Oh, yeah.
see the rhythm that we're talking about? And for me, it's more than anything, it just, by coaching women, I just don't see this. And to me, it really stands out.
The other thing that it does show also is better suspension of body weight. And if you're able to get the weight off the seat, it's going to come back down on the seat. You really can't help that. Yeah, it's too bad you guys are seeing a choppy version of this. It's way better when it's smooth. Let's do it again. One of the things I do coach my guys is to feel light on the seat, which means essentially their body weight, as much as manageable, is being held between their feet and their hands without losing contact with the seat, of course. But and that'll lend itself to some of that bounce. Not as efficient, obviously, when you're at low rate like that, because you can see that it does that twice, right, through the course of the finish of the stroke, after the finish of the stroke. But again, I don't have the physics answer for that.
Sean, to ask another point off of that, do you see a big difference? Because again, it's still choppy, so it's tough to tell. But as they're driving, it doesn't look like their shoulders are lifting up at all. So they're not really rowing vertically and then dumping themselves down. It's just very horizontal with the shoulders, and then they finish, and then their bodies, everything, the center of mass moves back and all that stuff. Do you coach? So do you coach away from that, or?
Yeah. So the danger of suspension, full suspension, and Beth, you remember some of this, like some of Igor's, like real full suspension up and down to learn how to do it, and literally hopping off your seat and landing really hard on the seat. That's going to be a product of vertical. And actually, to be honest, the way I learned this myself when I rode for Igor, and I went through that process of like just up and down and up and down. I said, there's no way that this, it's powerful, not really sustainable. It's short and not efficient, but the boat does really move. So you got to come up with a better way to apply it. And so I essentially take that vertical arc or arch like that and just try to flatten it out this way. So you feel light on the seat. So you feel your body weight literally just lifting up off the seat a little bit, okay? In that sense, you're still using body weight to move the boat, but it's maybe more sustainably than if you're doing pure up and down kind of thing. So that in order to get that flatter, instead of having this up and down arc where you're literally pushing up and having to lift up and come down, is exactly right. I train them away from that. I train them to stay very horizontal with their heads, with their shoulders, okay? And that every aspect of the stroke should be parallel, as much as possible, parallel with the water or the line of the boat, so that heads running level, shoulders running level, chest running level, hips obviously running level, and then hands, of course, and elbows.
So here's maybe a my curiosity question for you, because these guys are obviously doing the kind of the spending time at the finish and then coming up like pretty light and quicker, and that's definitely opposite of like when you're a baby coach, and I just am curious if you could speak to just sort of your process in deciding that you wanted to teach this way versus the other, and what brought you around to it, and what different challenges you find coaching one style versus the other.
Okay, so that's actually a really good question. I've actually had this question a number of times, thought about it a lot too. If you guys don't know, so Igor, who was a sculling coach in the US for 10 years, and was the only one who ever won any medals with it, really, had a very specific technique he called rebound. It was initially described as wah, but we turned it into this rebound. And a lot of that really caught on, okay? So the idea of rebound, so the quick hands away, but the problem is, it's not quick hands away, but for the sake of argument right now, the quick hands away, so you finish the stroke and you're back out again, right? Or is everybody familiar with this, or anybody not familiar with it? Let's just assume everyone's familiar with it. All right, so that caught on. And even when I came to Philadelphia, in 2015, I started watching people do this. I'm realizing, people are rebounding, but I'm just like, they're not rebounding actually, because the boat's not moving. You can't rebound without a boat that's not moving. And the reason is, rebound only comes from bending the oars. It doesn't come from anything else. And what I was watching people do was finish a stroke and shoot their hands right back out again. So the sense of boom, like this with the hands, this boom, that's rebound. And no, it's not rebound. So that was problem number one. And I tried to do this. I tried to do this in 2017, actually, Becky, with that quad. I started in 2016 with them and tried in 2017 to coach this sense of rebound, which is supposed to come from the body. Body pressure against the handles should bring you back into the recovery. It's a very dynamic stroke, but the guys couldn't get it. And it was going to be, and I was getting too much sort of pushback. John, getting back to your earlier question, from guys in the boat who knew better than I did about how to row. So I steered away from that a little bit. Okay, so that's one half of the answer as to how I came around to it, Beth. The other half of that answer is I noticed that people weren't finishing their strokes either. So in the rush to get out to the next stroke, everyone's cutting off the finish a little bit. And again, you can cut off the finish if there's bend in the oars. And you can't see the bend in my arm, but if there's bend in the oars, you can cut off the finish. But if there's no bend in the oars, don't cut off the finish. So guys are cutting off their finish to get out to the next stroke. And the net result of that is the acceleration curve, the sense of accelerating through the finish isn't there. And with the rebound technique, you are accelerating right through the finish. This is one shot, almost jumping through the finish. You got the connection right to that point, and then you come back around. That's your rest time. A very difficult stroke to master and then to train for. But because guys were doing it with their hands, they weren't finishing already. Now they're cutting off their finish. And I'm watching, in the years I'm going to Worlds and watching these other teams, and everyone's doing this, we call it the Drew Ginn style. It's been around longer than him, but the sense of run the boat, draw the recovery, run the boat, draw the recovery, which is really good in small boats. I'm watching them do this. I'm watching them do this in fours. I'm watching them do this in the quad. The Kiwis and the Aussies in particular. And what I was noticing is that they really, really good send off the finish. Very distinct, boom, right to this point here. Send the boat, feel the spring of the blades off, out of the water, against the water, right to that point here at the finish. So I decided I got to train my guys to do that so we can get more out of their stroke. I've always been a front end kind of coach because of a heavyweight guy. I tend to be in faster boats. So the front end is really important, but we were losing so much back end, I had to change that. So in researching as much as I could research, so the differences in how this technique works, they've measured this stuff as well. And so there's measurable, much greater secondary acceleration of the hull through the water in this particular stroke. But also to do it right, it's difficult. So you have to train it for a while. I like that idea. I'm still a front end, take the catch while with power, with speed. But the fact of the matter is the Dutch also row this way a lot like this. They do some other things also really, really, really well. And they are the standard. They have set a new bar for this event. So, I think that their road is, for lack of a better term, the more correct one, the one that is working better right now.
Are you talking about the Dutch quad?
Yes.
Or Dutch stroke in general?
The Dutch quad, but the Dutch quad is doing it. The Dutch single is doing it. And he was in the finals. I think he finished 4th, and he was a spare. The Dutch 8 is doing it. The Dutch 4 is doing it. And yeah, I don't know how their pair's doing. Those 4 boats are already set to medal. The quad's going to win. The Dutch are going to come in easy top 3 and very possibly could win, although we think the Germans will still pull it out again. In the single, like I said, he was a spare and he finished, I think, 4th last year, 4th or 5th, whatever. He was in the final. And after the 4th. So The Dutch are surprisingly deep in talent, if not people.
So when you swapped to this, you were already at Penn AC, already had a group of people training with you. And so how'd you sell it in terms of like, hey guys, we're changing it all up. Let's go.
I just said it's what we're going to do. I haven't had a whole, too difficult a time selling technique to my guys. Because the rationale that I used, and yeah, it was done entirely at Penn AC. Before that, I was still all about, the Igor style of rebound. I just was having a lot of trouble getting people to do it. But before, but when we did this, the rationale I used was exactly, we need to finish our strokes. We need to make sure that we're getting good send off to finish because we've been losing that. And I think as soon as they started doing it, they realized, yeah, we've been missing this part.
And then not to keep beating the topic, but what in teaching this, is there any particular part of it that you think is difficult? Like, what do you think is difficult about
teaching this technique? Properly drawing the boat on the recovery without people slamming into the front. So you have to, like, when to pull the boat up underneath you, how to do it, how to relax in the process, because it is supposed to be your rest time. And again, how not to bang off the front of the boat. And to be honest, RP3, we don't have any RP3s, but C2s on sliders are really good for that. You just learn to control the boat underneath you. Being humans, we're all about arms and hands and control up here. But everything we do is down, is really chest down. So, just controlling everything underneath. So learn how to drive the boat, learn how to draw it, learn how to draw and let it run, by staying relaxed. And it just comes with time. The concept repeated, it just eventually hits people.
Sean, a follow-up to that one. I've found that with that, hard finish like that, and maybe it's just from lack of time, but I even see it in some more international races that you watch just on YouTube. Is boats that tend to have that hard finish kind of almost pause at the release and then come out of it. They hit that last 500 and they just struggle to bring the rope that beat or two to finish off a race, and they tend to get walked through, especially at the lower level of rowing in high school that I'm at.
Yeah, well, sorry, is your question finished?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, and that's a point that I've had some discussions about also. The theory, is that if you teach yourself to keep stopping at the finish, you might do it while you're racing. And the fact of the matter is, if you watch top level racing, which is, it's different. It's what I do. It's not, so I don't have the same issues that you have with newer kids. So these guys already know, well, you can't really stop in the middle of a stroke, so you have to keep going. That time at the back end just goes away. Basically, what you're doing is you're running a pause drill and just infinitely shortening the pause, right? Just a real higher rate. You get what I'm saying? And that's what they do at the senior level. If you watch, the Dutch, or you watch the Kiwis, the Australians, they do exactly that. They're just not pausing anymore. Their pause is just so short you don't see it. Essentially, that's all it comes down to. So, what I would do is I wouldn't necessarily say, as a high school coach, or even as a college coach. I mean, you can do it at the collegiate level, I suppose. But I wouldn't necessarily say, okay, we have to row this style, we got to row this technique, and da 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 da. I think that what it does when you're doing this, especially earlier in the year, is really good for bringing people together. It's really, finish is a great gathering point for a crew. When I was rowing for Igor, the catch was the gathering point. Well, that's catastrophic if you don't know what you're doing. At least with the finish as a gathering point, it's natural. So the boat is doing what it's going to do anyway. And then you essentially just row yourself out of that. Like you train yourself out of that. But as a coach, you need to be conscientious. You need to say, okay, look, as the rate comes up, you're not pausing, right? You're just going to keep moving. You finish stroke and you go for the next one. But it's not like you necessarily have to start going faster and faster for all parts of it, right? First thing is, as boat speed increases, time through the water decreases, okay? And as boat speed increases, that time around the back end, that moment before you take the next stroke decreases. Then the last thing to decrease should be your slide speed. Did I answer enough?
Yeah, sorry, I just muted. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I use that as a drill a lot. I'd call it Australian rowing, where we hit the release, hold it for a hot second, and then like you said, gather there. And I find that very helpful. High school girls just don't have the power to do it.
Well, right, but actually, I'll tell you this: it's a very good thing, especially you start them early, because that's the hardest thing for let's say women in general, but high school girls to develop is that upper body strength that they need. Guys, especially high school guys, are growing into it right as you're doing it, right? So they all want to do that, but for I think women in general, it's just not as, you're not necessarily built that way. So you have to spend the time training it for it to be really effective. And to be fair, well, I gotta say, I haven't watched a whole lot of different women's teams as much as I watched the men's teams. I think the Kiwi 8 was pretty good at that. The US 8 tends to get much more body movement from what they're doing. Maybe more in the, it's more in the body, not so much the sense of real strong connection through the finish, from the elbows. I think there's one difference that I saw between those two boats last year, but I don't have, I didn't study a lot of the women's boats, so I couldn't tell you if that's really better thing for women or not. I don't see why not.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Anybody else have any thoughts? Anybody want to add anything, or throw a monkey, or throw a wrench in the, whatever, wrench in the works, throw a monkey in a wrench? Yeah.
I've got one last question. No one else does. I feel like I've had a lot of the airtime now. But if no one else is talking,
Yeah, go for it.
through the quarantine, I've just been watching a lot of higher level rowing. And one thing I've been noticing is, and something that I personally don't think I teach very well, is that hip pivot back. And it seems like a lot of higher level boats really pivot the hips hard. So they drive those legs, then they hard pivot, finish the stroke off, like you were just talking about. What do you feel is, in your mind, correct on either, that hard pivot stroke that seems to be getting more and more popular, or, that taller finish, almost cutting off your body angle as you release the stroke?
Are you seeing this across boat classes, or is this more?
Definitely in the sculling. What was the pair that does it really hard? I think the Croatian pair. Was it Croatian? I don't remember. Definitely in some of the smaller boats. It's on a lot of, I don't know if you've watched any of the Aram training videos, but he talks about that. There's a lot of videos on how to pivot the hips at I don't want to say different point, but like how to pivot the hips correctly to save your legs and finish the stroke off.
To save your legs. Huh. It's interesting because I don't see it maybe quite as much as you do.
I've also been looking for it because the
Yeah.
videos I've been watching specifically for that.
Because I mean, I could point off the top of my head, 15 boats that don't do it that do pretty well. But let's say maybe like the Italians. Italians do something like that, right? You're talking about just basically drive the legs, swing the body, like leg swing kind of thing, or
Yeah, just using that hip opening as like a gathering point for your crew and really trying to maximize your power curve at your hip swing where your blade is perpendicular to the boat. And I've done some reading that says the best time to drive your boat's not at that position anyways. But that's
right. You want to be about
norms.
15, 20 degrees in front of perpendicular, really. But and the faster a boat goes, the more towards the bow that's going to move, right? So singles, yeah, you want to be coming right through perpendicular, right, with your max power. But faster boats it's gonna happen earlier. I guess, well, my first thing is I'd have to really see more what you're talking about, because I think that there's a difference between what you're saying. That sounds to me like British style, like the British will do something. Like the British men's quads seems to me that they do something like you're talking about, or it sounds like it. And look, at the end of the day, I've seen boats win rowing every style there is. Every style you see out there, boats have won doing it. Boats have won doing the Igor style. Boats have won doing the exact opposite, the Australian, the Drew Ginn style. Boats have won doing, this pry, everything open, lifting your body weight and just driving down to the water. Becky, you might be interested. Back in the early 2000s, I think it was, the Polish lightweight men's double. This one motion opening, very much, so much rise and fall of the boat, especially for lightweights, and they dominated. I mean, no one could touch them. They won every race by like 2-3 lengths open. It was crazy. So I mean, the point being though, is that all of these techniques have won medals, and so at the end of the day, you just kind of have to pick the one that you think you can coach the best, or might be the most efficient for the crew that you have, like the strengths, or might play to the strengths of the crew that you have. There are techniques that do put more power on the oars, but can you make it down a 2,000 meter course? Doing that is part of the problem. Just a quick, story about that. So when Igor came to the U.S. in 1990-91, Korzeniowski, got really excited about this style of rowing, the Igor style of, full suspension, jumping through the stroke, the wah kind of stroke. So what Korzeniowski tried to do was have us do it. When I was rowing sweep at the time, have all the sweep boats do it. And if you can imagine, an 8 full of guys doing this, or a Cox 4, and I was in the Cox 4, trying to just like jump on these strokes. The loading, the heaviness of a Cox 4 as it was just a crazy heavy stroke, and the boat would go really, really fast. I mean, just you just take off. You're just killing it, right? And somewhere about 1,500 meters in, you were done. You just had nothing left. And that was, that's a tough thing. You could maybe spend the years training it, but the U.S. system isn't set up to spend 4 years training something. We have to do it every year. So you got to, the point is, you just have to sort of pick what works to the strengths of the program overall, I suppose. They're all going to work.
Yeah. Cool. I think we've been an hour, so I think we'll let everyone go. Thank you, Sean, for taking the time to talk to us today. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. And we will do this again next week. So thank you and have a good night.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Sean. Thanks, Sean. I got in late. It's well played.
Oh, look. Well played.
I double booked webinars, man.
Yeah. You've just been sitting back there really quiet, listening off my screen, right?
I only came in the last 10 minutes. It's good stuff, though.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, I missed you last week, so you got me back. I was on a train last week. I have a real excuse. I was actually on a train at the time. So.
I mean, John, we should look, but yeah, U.S. Rowing's rolling out webinars too. That's there's a strength and conditioning coach from the USOC that they had on.
Nice.
Yeah, they're releasing like one a week, right?
I mean, it might slow down. There's a whole bunch right now. There's like 4 or 5. Yeah.
I get like 5 emails a day from them.
Yeah, they're doing work right now. It's crazy.
Just took a questionable like quarantine.
Yeah. But
Sean,
right.
I actually just found the video I was talking about was the Sinkovic brothers do that hip hinge very hard every time.
Yeah, well, those guys. Yeah, they row their stroke like they're doing cleans. But you got to remember too, they've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So they started off rowing a little bit different. They raced the quad first, and I don't know what they did as U23 or younger, but they started off in the quad and had a lot of success in the quad. But they were rowing more driving body weight. It's kind of, which is one of the things I teach also. Like we drive the body weight. I try to mix it all together. Drive the body weight, take your time, draw the boat. Drive the body weight, take your time, draw the boat. But those guys did more of that then, and they graduated out of that. When they were in the double, they started getting more body, legs opening like that, a little bit more powerfully.
Mm-hmm.
And they were getting, it was not too dissimilar to the Polish light double from about 10 years before. And I think they've just taken that into the pair then too. So.
All right, thanks.
And they're also on drugs, but you didn't hear that from me.
Do you think there's anything to be done about getting guys in this country to just have longer careers, or is it just sort of a hopeless endeavor?
Well, the short answer, there's always something that can be done. I think part of it has to come from the top. It needs to be sort of, I don't know, touted as or displayed or whatever, just out there, from U.S. Rowing as, this is what you got to do. This is what it's going to take. U.S. Rowing doesn't give you any idea at all that if you